Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to create an ETF report based off of the other scripts that we have been working on. So if you recall, in the last tutorial, we went over this script, which gathered all the open, high, low, close volume data for all of our ETFs, which is the data we're going to be using in the current script to analyze our ETFs. Now we're going to be using that data to make calculations, and there are three things that I wanted to pay attention to. One was the percentage return of each ETF for a couple of different time frames. So arbitrarily, I just chose the 1-day percentage return, the weekly return, and the monthly return. The final output of this RMD file can create an HTML, and it will look something similar to this. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at three things, and I've summarized the data into two sections. So first, we're going to be taking a look at by category. So the first two charts here, we see that 1-day percentage return. Here in first place, we see the Chinese equities, which in my data set, there are 23 different ETFs. The 1-day percentage return was almost 5%, and we're going to list the top and bottom 10, and the data was as of October 4th, as you see from the report up here. We also have the bottom 10 ETF groups, and the last one being the worst. So we see that in this category, I only have 3 ETFs labeled leverage volatility. So here we have the 1-day, we also have the 1 week, and the 1 month. I also want to take a look at the unusual volume, and for this section, I just want to take a look at what's gaining traction for each of these time periods. And the last thing I want to also pay attention to is the accumulation distribution using the same time periods. Now for this section, we compare the closing price for each of these time periods relative to their ranges using the high and the low. So if we take a look at this first observation for inverse commodities, which we only have one ETF, this value is at 100%, meaning that this ETF closed at the high of the day or at 100% of the day's range. In contrast, if we take a look at the worst, we see that this basket of 9 ETFs for oil and gas closed relatively close to the low of the day at only 40% of its range. And if we have a value of 0%, that just means we closed at the lowest point of the range for that specific time period. So we're always going to get a value of 0 and 100%. Now, having a value of 100% shows me that there's a lot of interest for that particular market or basket of ETFs, since the price ended up being at the very top of that range. So again, we have the 1 day, the 1 week, and the 1 month. Now in this report, we can get more specific, where instead of using the categories for the ETFs, we can use their segments. Now these are just labels that better define the ETF and their strategy. So as an example, if we have Chinese equities, and there's a basket of 23. That basket can be composed by many different strategies, such as utilities, large cap, and so on. So doing the same analysis by segment, we'll have fewer ETFs since these are more specific. For the Chinese equities, we see that here in position 2, that ETF strategy was leverage equity, composed of the Chinese total market. So we have the 1-day return, the 1 week return, and the monthly return. We also have the unusual volume by segment. And of course, for the last one, we have the accumulation distribution. So as I mentioned, these values go from 100 all the way down to 0. If you want to see what these ETFs are composed of, there's a section down at the bottom where we can just search some keywords. So for example, if we take a look at this first one, labeled as Equity Asia Pacific Total Market, we can type that in to return the basket of ETFs. So if we type Equity Asia Pacific, it's going to return all the ETFs that match that criteria. So let me shrink the report a little bit. And if we scroll down, we can see all the ETFs there. Now for this one, you can also export them if you click on the Excel or CSV button, which will generate the report. So if we open that up, so we have the symbol, the trade date, the ETF category, the asset class, the asset size, the style, the segment, and here's where we keep all of our calculations. So we have the 1-day return, the 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 3 month, and the 1 year, the relative volume for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, the volume for 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and 3 months. We also keep track of their drawdowns. So we have the 1 week drawdown, 1 month, 3 months, and 1 year. And these are the max drawdowns given these time frames. The accumulation distribution, again for 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, and 1 year. We also return the 52-week high and the 52-week low, the latest price for the ETF, and the percentage given the close to the 52-week high and the 52-week low. So within the script, you can rearrange or insert your own metrics. So if we take a look at our actual script, So here in the first section, we're going to require these packages. We're going to insert a trade date, which should ideally be the same date that you gather your price data for. We're going to extract the unique tickers from our bar data. We're going to be reading in our table containing all the ETFs, along with their categories and market segments. Now there may be a mismatch between the ETF database that we have and our bar history, so we need to compensate for that and only include all of our ETFs within this table that we were able to pull data for and exclude all others. And the report will use all the ETFs that we were able to pull data for, which this report includes over 1,000 different ETFs. Now we also need 3 helper functions. The first one is called getStats, where we pass in the ETF and we're going to create our calculations. So here's where you would kind of change things if you want to use a different time frame, but I just wanted to use the 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, and the 1 year. And we're going to go ahead and return a data frame with all the values I showed you in the Excel report, where we include the category and the segment along with the returns, the relative volumes, the average volumes, the max drawdowns, the accumulation distribution, and the 52-week range. And we also have 2 functions where we plot by category or plot by segment. For the report, you may have noticed that we have 6 charts which compare the 1 day, 1 week, and 1 month. So we're going to pass in the data that we want to plot, and I'll show you later down in the script what those tables are. And we also need to pass in a name, and this name gets passed into the subtitle for our charts. So we're going to have 6 plots within this function. The main thing that changes for each of these charts are the data that we pass in. So here we have the movers for 1 day, the movers for 1 week, and so on. And for each of these blocks, you'll notice that we have ETF category on the x-axis. And once we have constructed all of our 6 charts, we're going to use HW Grid to plot all 6. Now our next function is pretty similar, which is used for plotting as well. And in this function, we have the same parameters. The only thing that changes is what we're passing in for the x-axis. So in this case, we're just going to be replacing the ETF category by asset segment. And again, we're going to calculate those 6 charts and return it as an HW grid. Now that we have that, we can calculate all of our stats, which is going to generate one table, which is the table I showed you in the Excel report, by using the getStats function. And we're going to subset all of our stats for that given day. We don't want to include anything else. And in line 306, which is optional, you can save all stats locally as an RDS file. So you might want to change the path here. And in the following blocks, we're going to use all stats to generate summaries. So again, as I showed you in the first section, we're going to be analyzing by category. To get the top gainers, we're going to pass in all stats grouped by ETF category, and we're going to reframe to calculate the average for each of these groups, given the 1 day, 1 week, and 1 month. And we also want to return the ETF count. Since these are percentages, we want to multiply them by 100. We want to rearrange by highest to lowest and subset the top and bottom 10. Given these 6 tables, we can pass them in to plot all 6 by category, and the name or the subtitle for this chart will all read by percentage return. Similarly, we have the unusual volume, and again, we're passing in all of our stats. We're grouping by ETF category. This time, we want to calculate the average of our relative volume, return the ETF count for each of these ETF categories. We're going to multiply by 100 and subtract 100 to get the actual percentage. And again, rearrange highest to lowest, subset the top and bottom 10 categories, and plot these in. And in the last block, we have the accumulation distribution, which again passes in all of our stats. We're grouping by ETF category, and this time our averages will be the accumulation distribution. And for the next 3 blocks, you can just copy the previous 3, and the only thing that's going to change is the group by method. So here by asset segment, we're going to group by the actual segment of each ETF. Everything else will stay the same except for our plotting function, which will now plot by the segment instead of the category. So we have the percentage returns, the unusual volume, and the accumulation distribution. We're going to add our all stats table in the final block of this R markdown. So we want to return the trade date as a character. We're also going to round all necessary columns to 4 decimal places, which are columns 8 through the number of columns in all stats. And finally, returning all stats as a data table, adding the CSV and Excel buttons so that we can easily export from the actual report. Well guys, this concludes the video. I hope this was useful information. I'll leave a link down in the description area to my Patreon where you can find the script. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.